Welcome back to the Catholic Buzz. So excited to have you with us again, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or maybe you're watching from our parish website as well. This is our 11th episode of the Catholic Buzz, and joining me always is Josh Sullivan. Josh,
hello.
You just bought a brand new house.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
It's kind of crazy.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I'm really excited. I got 10 acres now that kids, 4 boys can run around in. It's going to be great.
10 acres. And there's a guest room for me.
Well, yeah, we're building one. Yeah.
Great.
And then it will be a nice doghouse, and either or, we'll make it work.
Oh my gosh.
I meant for me, when I'm in the doghouse.
I was going to say, speaking of the doghouse, we also have Matt Van Milligan on the show.
That was nicely teed up.
That was nicely teed up. Yeah. Matt, how about you? You haven't bought a new house, but you're still enjoying your time with your family.
I am very much. Oh, we got a new van this week.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
A time of newness.
Yeah. It's
let me just throw this out there in case viewers are watching. You guys started doing a podcast, The Catholic Buzz, a while ago. Now you're buying a new house and you're buying a new van. This must be a really lucrative sort of...
Are we monetized?
Yeah.
Are we? You'll see the little advertisements at the bottom of the screen coming across.
Are you getting more in your contract than me is what I'm wondering.
No, but I drink Diet Pepsi.
Oh my gosh. It's been a while since we've all chatted. So very quickly, before we get into today's topic, I love today's topic. We're talking about your faith with other people, but we're back to Mass. We're back to public Mass. So how's your experience? Because I've seen you both on the weekend. How's your experience been? Just quickly.
It's exciting to be back at Mass for sure. It's a little bit restrained, a little bit awkward with a mask. Although this time it was just my wife and I. We left the kids at home, so that was actually kind of nice because we heard the whole homily, and
you actually could be part of the Mass.
Nobody was hurt. Yeah, no, it was it was great.
Yeah. And I think too, I was actually shocked by the amount of people that didn't come. That was one of the things. I mean, I understand because it's not. You don't have to come to Mass at this point. You're still at that. But to see sometimes that the pews were empty, I didn't expect that. I thought that we'd have going from 200 people down to 50 or whatever the case may be. Yeah,
and I was just talking with, I think it was Matt before we went on the air. Sorry, I forget if it was. That seems to be the case, across Ontario at least. Yeah, I've been talking to my priest friends down south and around, and that just seems to be the case, that the numbers are really low. So people are coming back to church slowly.
Yeah.
Some people are still uncomfortable.
And it's understandable if you're uncomfortable and that kind of stuff, especially in the age group that the churchgoers normally seem to be. That seems to be the riskier age when we're talking about COVID and stuff like that. So that makes sense to me.
And of course, the obligation to attend Mass is still suspended.
Yeah.
Which also brings me to a funny thing. What's that going to look like when the Canadian bishops or the Ontario bishops have to say,
go.
Yeah, I've been wondering about that a lot. What is it going to look like? It's like, okay, starting next week, you have to go back to church now. That's probably a little whiles away, right?
Yeah,
on our health
I'm going to say probably until we either get herd mentality immunized, so 70% of all people are immunized to it, if that's the case, or we have a vaccine for it. I don't know if they can.
I know, and maybe that's going to be a really good opportunity to talk again with Catholics about the obligation to attend Mass.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it has been taken away from us, being reinstated. I'm curious as to see what the wording is going to be like. How do you tell people that starting today or July 1st?
You need to put yourself at risk and get into public.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
So anyways.
It's going to be interesting.
We leave that to people who get way bigger paychecks than us.
The wisdom that, Jesus had when, who do we give this money to? Gives to Caesar what is Caesar gives. That's the bishop's going to be praying the whole year for, okay, give us that wisdom because we need this wording just to be right.
It's so true. Speaking of wisdom, today we're talking about sharing your faith with other people. Lots of people, I get this question a lot. How do I talk to my children? How do I talk to my friends? How do I talk to my coworkers about the Catholic faith that I love so much? And it's a really I love hearing that question because it really shows a desire from people to share their faith, right? Mm-hmm. But it's also sort of a cringeworthy moment sometimes when you hear what people are doing when they're sharing their faith.
Oh, yeah.
And I say that with all love and all respect, but there are a lot of don'ts that people are doing in sharing their faith. So I think it'd be a really good discussion today for us to talk about that. What's a good approach when talking to our friends, our family who don't come to church, our coworkers, people we run into, you know? Because I think when people encounter Catholics as they are, as they really are, then they're pleasantly surprised. I would think. Hey, they're like, oh, they're not in my face or weird or brash. I don't know. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think like the just sort of like general blanket statement is kind of meeting people where you're at. Like you said talking to your children about your faith is very different than talking to your friends about your faith. It's very different from talking to your coworkers about, because you're not under the same obligations of professionalism with your children as you are with your coworkers, but also you have a responsibility to kind of instruct, and you're responsible for the formation of your children. So, and also your children aren't coming with a whole bunch of preconceptions or misconceptions about what Catholicism is, what your faith is, as maybe your coworkers or friends or even other family members might.
Yeah, and maybe we're talking about family members and things. Something not to do, I would say right off the bat, is argue. Right? Argue is bad. Yeah. Like, that's, I think, how a lot of religious conversations start, with an argument. Like, why are you doing that? You're supposed to be Mr. Holy that goes to church and things like that. Yeah. And then it's like, you don't know what you're, and then that's how these religious conversations kind of go.
I think for a lot of people, I think, Matt, you hit the nail on the head when you said meeting people where you're at and where they're at.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing, because I think a lot of where I see arguments happen is someone will say something probably to get a rise out of you. Like, I've seen it around like campfires, or like you're drinking beer or whatever the case may be. I've seen that before. They're doing it to get a rise a lot of times, and it's a family member of some sort. They just want to get you riled up. But that's okay, because you can still use that moment to do teaching. But a lot of times they're asking questions, and a lot of times the reaction of people tells a lot more about whether they know what they're talking about, whether they don't. Because when people go to an anger or an argument or a whatever, sometimes they do that to win the argument. Get big and powerful because I'm going to win the argument, but they don't actually have any backing to their argument. You know what I mean? So some of the wisest words, I mean, you talk about Jesus in the Bible and saints and stuff, and like Jesus standing there and he's drawing his fingers in the sand, they're going to stone the woman, and then he just kind of draws with his finger in the sand, and he doesn't get big, loud, boisterous. He just gives a couple of words that calm the whole situation out and just make everyone think about it. So like, well, those without the first sin cast the first stone. And then just everyone goes, oh. So what I would say is, right off the bat, pray. If you see the opportunity, as Christians, we're called to evangelize. We're called to spread the word of the Gospels, and we're called to share Jesus with other people. This doesn't mean getting on a soapbox and yelling at people and telling them that they're going to hell because what they're doing is wrong. It's learning, having a relationship with them. They have to know to trust you. But the second part of that is understanding you don't have to have a PhD in this stuff. Like the early apostles and disciples, like Jesus talked to them a little bit, and then he sent disciples, 72 or whatever the number was, I can't remember, like, go out and now go spread the word. And this is why, like, he's here. They could get it straight from from God, from Jesus' mouth, but he's telling them, go out now. And then dust off the sandals if they don't accept you and all that kind of stuff. But he's telling, like, they don't have any more training. They're like a couple fishermen and a couple, like, they don't have all that PhD stuff.
And what were they doing? They were telling their own experience of encountering Jesus.
Exactly.
So they were just sharing that with people. They were like, yeah, this is what Jesus himself taught. This is what Jesus has showed us. And they're sharing that with other people. They're not going like to ridiculous lengths that sometimes we feel. Sometimes we feel that pressure, though. Hey? Like, we feel that some Catholics feel that pressure. Like, I have to be the one to really bring someone closer to the faith. But I think that's a good point. It's talking about your experience.
Yeah, and a lot of it depends on the context of the discussion itself, whether it's a friend around a campfire or after a beer, or two, when you start asking kind of honest questions, or it's somebody shouting at strangers on the internet, trying to fact check the entire world of social media. It's like trying to empty the ocean by bucketfuls. But yeah, it's just and what you said about it becoming an argument or it starting on the foot of an argument, it doesn't seem all that effective,
No.
unless your interlocutor, the person it has a philosophical background, or is coming at
It's
the
a
questions
debate
that
more
way.
than it is an argument.
But if you engage someone who's asking a sincere question as though they're starting a debate, that's not going to be very effective. And as someone who kind of had these questions early on, and maybe engaged in a more kind of apologetic mode, I appreciated that, but I wouldn't say that that's how you just encounter everyone at all times.
True, and like you're a good example, Matt, because like, well, I guess you're a good example, yeah. But your own story of conversion to the Catholic faith, like I'm sure you just sharing that story, that process, that journey with people has helped other people sort of ask interior questions or.
Yeah, and I think that's in turn maybe kind of the most effective witness I can give. That it's like while I'm interested in those conversations, interested in kind of the philosophical approach, the thing that really made me more kind of amenable to Catholicism are those who actually embodied actual Catholicism and invited me to participate in that. Yeah. So in turn, what I hope I can do is, raise my family up, be a person who lives honestly and with integrity in a sacramental way, and invite others to participate in that.
Yeah, action speaks so much louder than words a lot of times, right? I mean, one of the things, I worked a lot of, for lack of a better word, blue-collar jobs, a lot of hands-on jobs, a lot of environment that wouldn't necessarily lend to watching how you spoke or your words. But one of the things I remember, I was working construction one time, and they asked me out of the blue, point blank, and I'd been working with them for a couple months anyways. And I was one of the guys, and we're having a round of beers. We're out of town on a job site, and we're having a round of beers, and they're like, "So you're a Christian?" And I said to them, "Yeah, I am. Why? Like, trying to decide what am I doing that would make you think that?" They're like, "Oh, you never say the F word." I was like, "Pardon?" And they're like, "You never say you don't swear." And I was like, "Oh." I never realized that myself, and not that if you swear, you're not a good Christian. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what I'm saying. But to them, that simple action of me just trying not to follow it. I mean, I had kids at the time too, so I'm trying not to try to live that way anyways. Yeah. But that small bit of action showed them more than I think I could ever have said in my mouth, that I was living out a faith. You must be Christian because you don't swear. And I was like, oh. Oh, that's it's not my action. It's not the love that I show of Christ shining forth from me. That's but just that little bit.
It's not the halo above
around
my
me.
head
Exactly.
that shows you what I'm living at. Okay, so far we have don't argue, right? Yeah. But we do like something under the do's. Witness is what I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. Witness, like from your own experience, your own, that is so important. I think we underestimate how much our witness.
Yeah. I think that's why too. We also have to understand that we want to say. That's why personal prayer time is important. You're asking God every day to be a part of your life. So when someone says to you, if you're trying to look for an experience, well, if you've never asked for an experience, if you've never tried to encounter God, you've never done that, well, I go to church on Sundays. That's your experience of Him. Well, then get a deeper relationship with God. Strive for that little bit deeper, so that when you can say, well, no, you know what? There's this one time that this happened in my life, and this is what the outcome was, and it was because of my faith and because of Jesus, and because those are much more powerful than trying to debate the catechetical knowledge that you might have. Understand, like, I can't tell you why this happened, but this is the experience that I had. No one can argue your own experience and your own faith.
So true.
Right? So,
and talking about like the catechetical stuff, oftentimes when I go into a classroom, for example, that's what the students ask me right away. Why does the church teach this about this topic? Why does the church say that about that topic? And when I'm visiting a classroom for the first time, I don't tend to answer those questions right away, because isolated from our faith, they don't mean that much, right? But when we're talking about a relationship with Jesus, when we're talking about someone who follows the Catholic faith, the Catholic religion, is in a relationship with Jesus, then our teachings make sense when it's all the bigger picture, right? So then I always say to them, your questions are really good questions, but I'm going to come back to them later. Yeah. And then first, I get to know them. So we build a relationship ourselves, me and them. Then we start very basic. Who is Jesus? You know?
Yeah.
Then we move even basic. What did Jesus do when he came here? What are some things Jesus said about himself, about the world, about his Father? Anyways, so long story short, people, I think, when they talk about their Catholic faith, are often confronted with those questions.
Yes.
Those aren't the questions
you need to answer.
to talk. Those aren't the questions that we need to answer to really convince someone to be a part of our faith.
Yeah.
They come later. We were talking today about, what was the saying there? I think I heard it from an evangelization conference.
It's belong. So in order to believe, you need to belong. So if you behave properly in the church, if you behave like, as Catholics, we have that mentality. I think it comes from like long time ago, not necessarily now, but we need to change the mentality of, if you come to church, you need to sit down when we sit down, you need to stand when we stand, you need to sing when we sing, kneel when we kneel, and then if you do that, then we'll let you come. So if you behave, then you can belong to the community,
and
then you can believe.
But we're changing those around.
You have to change that around. You know, it's not behave to belong. It's if you belong, if you feel like you belong, then you will start to believe, and because you believe, you will behave.
And it's following the model of Jesus.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's building relationship with people. It's making people feel like they belong. Then once Jesus was in their presence, usually Jesus said something about the person he was talking to. He would say like, "Oh, I saw you standing under the tree," or "Your mother, I know your mother is this," or "Your daughter," whatever. So usually he would have some sort of relationship with someone and then act.
Yeah.
Right? So really we're following the model of Jesus in evangelization, in talking about our faith. We're not saying first you have to fit this mold.
Exactly.
You have to be this way to join the Catholic faith. We're not saying that. We want you to be yourself and grow into the knowledge and understanding of God.
Having been Catholic all my life, one of the best examples I can have of this is the way I almost treated a situation, which was, it was First Communion time. And so we had a whole bunch of people here at the church, not here, it was in Thunder Bay, but a whole bunch of people in the church that you don't ever see, if not normally see, you know what I mean? And so part of that is the parents of the people going to First Communion, some of it's aunts, uncles, whatever else the case may be. And I was sitting in my normal seat, got kicked out. I like to sit at the front with all the little kids, you know, can kind of get that. We were sitting a couple seats back, and when I was sitting there, the person directly in front of me had a large cup of Tim Hortons coffee. And was
it a French vanilla?
It smelled like English coffee more like.
Okay.
No, what I remember though is in my mind. So Mass had started, and this Tim Hortons cup of coffee was sitting out, and my mind first went, well, they don't belong here. Mm-hmm. And not only that, I also started criticizing, well, they're coming to Mass, they're just coming for First Communion, and being like a very stereotypical old Catholic, if you will, like just kind of being like, no, that's like, they don't belong here. Oh, I can tell they don't go to Mass because they've got a cup of coffee, and very judgmental and very not welcoming, was what was going through my mind. And it was actually in the words of the homily that it struck me, and I can't remember exactly what was said, but what I remember is it completely changed my attitude around. And what I realized was, what I recognized was this person wasn't from here. Two ways I can react. One is to criticize and judge, and I feel like a lot of times, or we're drawn to that. It makes us feel better about ourselves, maybe, I don't know, but we criticize. But what I should have done was be welcoming. This person obviously isn't from the church. That I could tell that from what was going on here. But instead of going over to them and saying, you can't have coffee here, this is not appropriate in Mass. Mm-hmm. What I should have done, I didn't do anything, actually, because so just to kind of wrap up, but what I should have done was go over and say, oh, you're not from around here. Hey, my name's Josh. Welcome to the community. What are you here? Oh, you're here for First Communion. Whatever the case may be was going on. But it was such
leave your coffee here.
Yeah. Well, do it the first time, and then the second time, like not approach the situation with criticism and whatever, but approach the situation with love and looking for a relationship with a person.
If you're just honest with people and you say, "Hey, like, welcome. Are you new here?"
Have the conversation. And
like,
then
we actually don't bring coffee past this point, or
Yeah,
like
exactly.
people are usually like, "Oh, sorry, whatever."
Yeah, they don't know.
So that's another thing Josh brings up is oftentimes we think of what we should do
Before,
and what we don't do, right?
I ended up doing nothing because I was so shocked at having this revelation during Mass that by the time I actually snapped out of it, because I was thinking about it the whole time, when I snapped out of it, they were up for pictures for communion and everything else, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm done. Like, I just kind of left it go. But if I wish I would have reacted in that moment. And now I try, when I see that situation or something like that situation, I reach out when I see somebody new in church. I try really hard because I've had that conviction a couple years back.
And a lot of people just don't even try.
Yeah, or I think sometimes there's this kind of like paralysis. There's like, I don't know the exact right thing that I should do, so I'm not going to do anything. And part of that, and part of it is kind of justified if your experience of kind of apologetics or sharing your faith is that person getting up on their soapbox with a bullhorn telling everyone that they're wrong, or just like shouting at people, answers to questions they're not even asking. That I think we don't want to be that person. But we don't know, how to actually have that conversation. So we just freeze, or we just don't engage. But I think that flipping that, inverting that understanding of understanding of belonging and behaving. If you have the conversation in like a casual relational way, like the same way you talk about anything that you're serious about, anything that you care about. Like if you're talking to coworkers, you don't. If you're talking about your kids, you're not like, well, I don't know if they have kids. You're like, I have 3 kids. Do they agree with me having 3 kids? Or like you don't go through this like anxiety talking about anything else that's important to you. No. But if your starting point is kind of that belonging, that understanding, you can communicate it in a way that isn't weird, or in a way that's like completely off-putting for people. And it's invitational as well. You're inviting them into an aspect of your life that is important to you. And it also a lot of these conversations happen kind of awkwardly at the point of behavior. You're talking about behavior. That like the starting point of that conversation is like, okay, you believe this. This is the way somebody should act, and that's your starting point. And you run into that situation where you're like, no, we have to lay like a whole kind of groundwork of talking about human dignity, because that's what this argument comes down to. And if you don't understand that, we can't really have a fruitful conversation about this contentious behavior that you want to talk about.
So what about someone who, let's say a parent with children, and I'm talking like children like teenagers in their 20s or 30s, because a lot of parents and grandparents are saddened that their kids and grandkids don't go to church. Where's the starting point for them? Like, where's the starting point for them to say, because I think people have just given up, like people say, well, I don't want to upset them, I don't want to offend them. And of course we believe this false thing that's being drilled into our head about we shouldn't speak about religion, there's a couple of things you can't speak about the dinner
politics
table, religion and politics
and
sex, I think is the other one. I think we believe that falsely. Religion is meant to be shared. It's meant to be we're supposed to proclaim the good news to people. So where would be a starting point for grandparents or parents,
open the conversation up. But here's the thing, watch your reaction. What do you believe? If I was sitting across from a teenager, the very first thing that I know, I'm a teacher, I'm a professor at college, but I taught high school. They smell bull crap a mile away. and you can't get by it. They read your 99 signals that you're sending versus your verbal language. So you're like, what do you believe? And if they're like, well, honestly, it's going to be hard for them to answer not the answer that you so desperately want them to answer if they don't believe that, right? And so if they say, well, do you want the truth? And you're like, yeah, and then they give you the truth, and you're like, right there, you've blown it, right? Not that you can, like, if you've done that before, you can get back on there, but it takes a lot of pride, knocking your pride down, and then just realizing that's where they're at. You need to lay out the starting ground. That's where they're at. Seeing that is okay with you, not that that's what you long for. That's not what you want to have happen, but that's where they're at, and you love them anyways because of that. You can open up that conversation later on. So then, well, that's good to know. Maybe ask them questions about what they believe or why they believe what they believe. Be interested in it, so you can kind of get a firm foundation of where they're at.
I think that's so important, is to focus like who we're talking to
On the relationship,
right?
yeah,
and not just assume. I think we do that so much, is that we assume everyone knows what we believe.
Yeah.
We assume everyone agrees with it, and we assume that everyone knows little teachings or little reasons why.
Yeah.
We have to stop assuming and ask people.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time I went into a classroom and I was like, oh, the teacher wanted me to teach about the Eucharist and how Jesus' real presence in the Eucharist. And I walked into that classroom, like grade 11, I think it was, or grade 12, maybe, I don't remember. And I was all ready to give this thing about the Eucharist. And I remember in the first 5 minutes, I asked them, how many of you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? And most of them raised their hand. How many of you believe Jesus is God? Not one hand, right? Not one hand out of 30 kids thought that Jesus is God in a Catholic school.
Yeah.
So I thought, time to scrap the Eucharist teaching and let's start very basic.
Yeah.
But that's a really good question, is to ask people, what do you believe?
Focus on the relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Build that confidence in discussing things, building that trust that, I'm going to share what I believe with you. That opens a sense of trust with them.
Yeah.
So now we're able to share a little bit more with them of what we believe.
And react with love. Always reacting with love.
True.
Not judgment, not hatred, not, oh, you're wrong because, argumentatively, whatever the case, but reacting in love. There is a time and a place to correct someone when they're doing something wrong. I think I've done that many times in my life, but I have a firm enough foundation in a relationship with them that they know that even though I say, okay, this is what I see is wrong, and I think you need to correct it, and I wouldn't be a good friend or a family member if I didn't say something. But I have a good enough relationship that they know if I walk away from this conversation and they don't change a dang thing, I still love them, and I still am going to treat them with the same respect and the same, you know what I mean? But I have to have that good enough relationship first before that actually happens. Because if they're worried about that, I just ruin the relationship, Yeah. You have to focus on the relationship.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing about just asking questions, this may just be because I'm generally kind of introverted, just get people talking about themselves, because then I don't have to say them. But no, and you really get even asking leading questions of what people actually believe. Because if you walk into a discussion, like you said, either assuming that everyone knows everything about Catholicism and has decidedly rejected it, or that they don't know anything about Catholicism and are like, okay, I'm here to teach you everything. You put on that hat. Neither of those seem to be that acknowledging that you're talking to a complex human being that has a lot of either preconceptions, misconceptions, experiences that they could have, that their sense of what Catholicism is could be informed by a bad relationship they had 10 years ago. So getting people to give you their perspective on what they think really, really helps to kind of guide the discussion in a constructive way.
And one more thing about that is, if people aren't sure about a teaching of the church, don't say it. Don't say it.
Don't make it up.
Don't make it up. So many times I've heard people say, oh, well, my friend told me this or about the church, or sadly enough, a priest or a sister told me this about, don't do that to make people feel.
No.
Don't force it to make people belong, right?
It's okay. Your vulnerabilities, by admitting that you don't know, first of all, to me, only admits that your faith is that much stronger, because you're actually believing something you don't have an answer for. But that, not for me, my life growing up, I married a woman that wasn't Catholic. I mean, she became Catholic, but she wasn't Catholic when we were dating. And every question she had only made me stronger as a Catholic, because I would say, I don't know. I went and got the answer. Asked the priest, asked a family friend that did know, or asked the teacher, or asked somebody, and then come back with the answer. And therefore, start getting that knowledge.
Yeah, and there's no dumb questions,
Never.
People are nervous sometimes to ask their priest or ask a friend or ask a parishioner, ask a family member about a religious topic. Just go for it, talk about it. And I think if everyone just played it cool, had a friendly discussion, Bishop Barron says all the time, the time to call off a conversation when you're talking about faith is when it starts to get emotional.
Yes.
Right? Then people's feelings are in the way now.
And now
it's time to cool it
not making sense.
and start a conversation another time.
There's a really good book I'm going to mention out there people can look into. It's called Yes or No by Peter Kreeft, or Kreeft, however you say it.
Or Kreeft.
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 Kreeft?
Kreeft. Peter Kreeft.
Okay, good. Anyways, his book, Yes or No, it's a thesis. It's two people arguing. There's a person that doesn't believe and a person that does believe, and it's showing their arguments. If you wanted to look at a way of talking about religion through a conversation, this is a perfect way of doing it.
Yeah, if you like apologetics, his way of going about it, most of his works are in a dialogue
very much so.
form.
It's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for the talk today.
Yeah,
it was great. And I think I want to challenge our listeners today to go start a conversation with someone about the Catholic faith, however that's going to look like. And then maybe they can share their experience with us.
Mm-hmm.
Start a conversation with someone about the Catholic faith. Ask them what they believe. Do whatever you feel like you can. Then send us an email at thecatholicbuzzpodcast@gmail.com and tell us what it's like. How'd that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll do the same.
We're not talking about necessarily the person sitting next to you on the bus. We're talking about somebody that you have a relationship with.
Somebody you have a relationship with.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless God is really, really pushing you to talk to that person in the grocery line.
Thanks, you guys, for this chat. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and have fun this week, whatever you're up to. Be safe. I know it's the summer months already, so whatever you're up to, stay safe. Matt, have fun with your new van, cruising down those streets. And we'll see you next time. For Josh Sullivan, Matt Van Milligan, I'm Father Dignali. We'll see you next time on The Catholic Buzz.